Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first weekly Catholic Gaming Podcast. On this podcast, we have John, Eques, and Robert, and this will be the first of a series of podcasts. Hopefully, we're going to do these every Saturday and then release them on the following Thursday. But yeah, we'll start where we left off the last time. But for this first one, I will be playing as Spain, Robert as France, John as Austria, and Equus as Poland. So we'll see how it goes, and then hopefully we can continue this game after we finish today. So yeah, I think that's about all for the logistics. I guess I'll kick it off to the group. Um, Russian war, obviously a pretty big headline. Um, what are people's takes on that?
Yeah, so I guess I can start. I think at a high level, and the least controversial opinion I have about it is that the Russian invasion is bad, and that Putin is, insofar as Putin and Russia have legitimate concerns in Ukraine, the correct answer is not invasion, and the death and destruction been brought about by the war. That being said, I think that many people in the West and in America, particularly, are sort of unaware of the broader complexities of the conflict and a lot of the nuance involved there. And specifically, they're not giving Russian interests in Ukraine enough of a hearing generally, even if those interests are not sufficient to justify war.
Sounds good. Um, yeah. Any other takes?
I think I broadly agree with those points. I do think though that for a very long time, Vladimir Putin has been signaling that something like this could happen if Ukraine fell into the US sphere of influence and specifically into NATO. Um, we were having a discussion earlier with John about um, just like the complexity and this idea that like a lot of people in the West don't appreciate the complexity of the issue. Um, I don't know how much. I think there's definitely a discrepancy between what the Russians are saying their reasons for the war are and what their war goals are, um, and what the reality is. But I think the discrepancies between what the Russian war goals actually are and what the Western media says they are even greater.
Yeah, I see that.
So what do you think the Russian war goals are then?
Well, the narrative that we have in the media, in the West is was trying to commit like a blitzkrieg, take over the entire country, and then militarily occupy it, and then possibly annex all of Ukraine, which is complete nonsense. Like it's militarily unfeasible. Ukraine is basically the size. It's like from east to west. It's like from Chicago to Washington D.C. That's a huge swath of land. Um, there is no way that you can militarily occupy a country that big, um, with without committing like a third of the Russian military, which is huge. It's like a million people, but still, like you cannot do that's not reasonable. Um,
I'm just gonna point out on the map this Lobau right here is the Lviv in modern day Ukraine. This green spot is I guess that's Crimea.
Nice.
So that just shows a bit of the scale.
Yeah. Um, well, this might be a stumper of a question, but was there any way to foresee this happening before it actually happened? Like, were there warning signs, or did it come out of the blue, or is it kind of a mixture of both?
can I
Um,
answer that question?
sure. Yeah.
Yes, Putin has been saying he will invade Ukraine if it tries to join NATO for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
That's
um,
kind of a straightforward answer, but I mean,
yeah.
the reality speaks for itself. Um,
Yeah.
the reason for that is because, I mean, you only have to look at countries like Poland. which are part of NATO and have U.S. missile sites located across the country along the eastern border, um, which are for defensive capabilities ostensibly, but the Russians claim they can be easily converted to be offensive sites. And Russia isn't very happy about that, but they have Belarus between themselves and Poland, so they're willing to tolerate it at least for now. Ukraine, on the other hand, is Russia's soft underbelly. If Ukraine were to join NATO and then have U.S. missile sites deployed right underneath Russian territory, right near the Russian border, they could not tolerate that at all. I believe the Russian argument that that would be an existential threat to the very existence of the Russian state. It would basically be the Cuban Missile Crisis, but for the Russians.
Yeah. And we're obviously talking about this in a political context, not like saying, oh, Russia doing what they did in terms of the civilian bombings and stuff like that is okay. We're just talking about it in terms of military strategy, and from a strategic point of view. Yeah, I would totally agree that uh, that would if I would if you were playing Russia in EU4 or EU5 or whatever, and it was 2020, and you didn't have to worry about like morals or anything like that, then that's how most people would probably play it. Um, and uh, yeah, I guess so. What are the similarities between this and the annexation of Crimea back in 2014? Like, did that? Uh, I don't actually know anything about it, or really not much, but um, it seems to me that the fact that they've done this recently was another warning sign as to what might be happening. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, one interesting thing I think about the Crimea situation is, and one substantial difference is that Ukraine had a very small military, as I understand it, during the Crimea incident. They basically had like 5,000 men, so they couldn't really resist at all. Like they just had to accept the seizure of Crimea as a fait accompli. Whereas now Ukraine has like the most powerful military in Europe, aside from the Russians themselves. And it's interesting. I don't know that it's directly relevant to your question, but I think it's an interesting note that Crimea that during the seizure of Crimea, like a lot of Russian nationalists are really regretting that Putin didn't take a harder stand in the Crimea crisis because they would have liked to have seen him depose, the current Ukrainian government right there and then when they didn't have a huge army, and now it's like they see it as being like too late, which is just an interesting Russian perspective.
Huh. Yeah, and so was there any reason why Ukraine was able to build up so quickly? Like they're not a part of NATO, so where did they get all of their weapons?
Well, I assume they got most of them from NATO. I don't know, Equus,
Really? Okay.
do you know anything about that? Like, where are they getting most of their
No,
weaponry?
no.
They definitely got a lot of their military infrastructure not from like NATO officially as NATO, but from the United States.
Interesting.
Huh. That is
And then
interesting.
over the last how many years is it? Like 8 years since the
Yeah.
annexation of Crimea. They've been fighting that civil war in the east, which has given their military a lot of experience. Um, I mean, the degree to which it's a civil war is I mean, that's kind of debatable. It's more of like an ethnic conflict between the Ukrainians and Russian speakers from the east.
Well, but they are Ukrainian citizens.
Well, they're Russian ethnically, right?
Yeah, they're ethnic Russians, as I understand it. But
And supported by Russian finances and strategic intel and that kind of thing.
so you and I were discussing this a little earlier. But to what extent do you think that they are just, a Russian puppet? The separatist republics, Luhansk and Donetsk.
Hmm.
I'm completely convinced that they're Russian puppets.
Okay, so again, how much popular support do you think that they have?
I think they're probably fairly popularly supported. It's just that it's sort of like we were saying earlier about how the United States orchestrated the overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2013. Like you can't say that the United States orchestrated that revolution, the Maidan revolution, and not say that Donetsk and Lugansk are not controlled by by the Russians. Like it's basically the same situation,
Yeah,
but on a smaller scale.
I think you're correct in that the separatists definitely like their support is coming from Russia, and they don't have like an independent, or they have a very limited independent foreign policy. I think what I mean mostly is the idea that they are popular in their regions, that they would probably win a democratic election. Because as I discussed, like the pro-Russian separatist party that Zelensky just banned, understandably, but he did ban it, was was very popular in those states in the Ukrainian controlled areas. So, but I think you agree with me that there is like legitimate like pro-Russian sentiment there. That's like that is like the majority there in those states.
Wait a second. Wait, it's time out. Robert, did you just get excommunicated?
Yeah, that always happens when you're playing as France. I don't know why this King Charles VII de Valois gets excommunicated, but that's
Wow.
what happened.
What the heck, man? Wow.
Well, apparently in the DLC, I have a queen and there's a dauphin
You're gonna have to go outside
or a
and stand.
dolphin.
It's
You have
pronounced
to stand
Dauphin,
for.
which is not at all how
um,
it's spelled. I
It's
think it's
pronounced dolphin.
no, it's Dauphin. Or how is it pronounced? Equus, is it Dauphin?
Alphon, I
Okay,
believe.
yeah,
yeah,
So it's
Robert,
pronounced all Frenchy.
you're gonna need to stand for 3 days out in the snow with bare feet on before we let you back in.
based.
I can't take my bare feet off. Oh,
Uh,
being excommunicated made all my vassals not like me as much.
yeah, I
That would
would
be hard
imagine.
to.
Sorry to
Now it's
interrupt, guys. Yeah, that was just
going to
too
be
good to
harder to
pass
get
up.
them to like me.
Yeah, how are we going to be defenders of Catholic Europe if one of our rulers is excommunicated?
Just wait for Valois to die and for the dolphin to take over.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
It's almost as funny a name for an heir as the Tsarevich.
Oh, the Tsar and the
That
Tsarevich.
sounds like you should be buying it at McDonald's.
How do you say Segemin, or like what's the proper pronunciation for like the Polish parliament that you have?
Oh, the same.
Oh,
Um,
it's
it,
pronounced the same.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. I guess that tracks like with the J being like sort of like a Y sounds.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Like
I've
It's
got
kind
a.
of it's kind of funny with like Lithuania, modern Lithuania is kind of like nationalistically opposed to Poland and like everything that it stands for because otherwise they just become like they have no reason to be independent. Um, but their parliament is called the Seimas.
Oh, that's funny. So, uh, you are a committed Polish nationalist, aren't you, Equus? That's your thing. So, how is it
Yes.
playing Poland in EU4? Do you love the vast holdings that Poland has?
Oh, absolutely. It's like the only country I play.
So, is there? I'm aware that there were like a lot of like pretty bloody conflicts in Eastern Europe in the 20th century, including with the Ukrainians in like Lviv, Lwów. Is that how it's pronounced in Polish?
So it's spelled with double U's, but it's still pronounced as a V.
Oh, so it's Lvov,
Lvov, yeah.
Lvov. Okay, interesting. I knew that. I'm sorry. I'm working on my Polish understanding of letters, uh, but
John, what date are you on?
I'm on May 2nd.
Oh, that's some lag.
I'm on May 6th.
Oh, that's
Same.
not much lag. Um, yeah, getting a fast computer is tricky.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But yeah, Equus, I'm just curious. Like, are Poles still kind of upset with the Ukrainians because of like the border wars that they had during the 20th century, or is that pretty much water under the bridge now?
Especially now with the Ukrainian conflict, people have sort of just abandoned historical animosities.
That's probably a good thing. I mean, it's good that people are getting along.
Well, yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, there's a point at which being welcoming to the refugees um, crosses the line into privileging the refugees, and I
Yeah.
think the Polish government is beginning to cross that line. They're starting to think about building housing, like apartment buildings specifically for the Ukrainians in a period where there is a housing young Poles.
Oh, that's not good.
Wow, interesting.
Well,
And are
hopefully
most
the
of the
Ukrainians will go back home eventually too, when
Well,
it's
not if
safer.
we build them apartment complexes.
Yeah, that's my yeah.
so are they mostly going to Poland then, the refugees?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I think we've crossed 2 million a
Oh
couple
my
days
gosh.
ago. Yeah, which is
Wow.
huge because I mean, you have to remember Poland's only got a population of about 38 million.
Wow. That's insane.
How many million refugees was it?
2 million into Poland. We're expecting as many as five, so that's like a 10%, more than a 10% increase
Gosh. Wow.
Two out
in the
of
country's
38
population.
million.
Yeah,
That's like that's like a bit over a 20th
yeah.
of the population.
Man.
Okay, I've PU'd Lithuania. I can ally Austria again.
Epic.
All right.
So what are people's takes? This might be kind of even a harder question than the last one, but what are people's takes on like the refugees? Like, you know, should you turn them away? Should you take them in? Like I watch Matt Frad sometimes, and he went to go help the refugees out in Poland, taking a break from his YouTube channel. And yeah, like I think I would say like something has to be done about that. But um, yeah, I don't know if there's just like a temporary thing that like volunteers could set up, like a temporary, something like barracks or something like that. Um, and yeah, because he was saying like there's mothers outside, bare feet on the ground in at night in Poland, where it's Polish in a Polish winter. Um, so obviously, there's a lot of people suffering and in need of help. Where does it cross the line, though, or does it cross the line?
Um, so I think from an American perspective, I don't know that it makes sense to take like a ton of Ukrainian refugees into the United States just because I think the thing with refugees is you should take refugees in because with the assumption that they'll eventually return home to where they're from because like they're
Mm-hmm.
not safe where they're at and you just need to provide them temporary sanctuary so that way they're not they're not going to get killed. Like you should make sure that they're defended and they're safe and they're fed and they're clothed. But I think one of the big issues that we've had since like 2015 with the refugee crisis from the Middle East in the wake of the Syrian war and the Arab Spring is like people use refugee status
Yeah,
as basically like a ticket into a country where they can make more money and they never intend on going home.
yeah,
To a certain extent that's understandable. If you're on the losing end of a civil war and you're going to go home and you're going to get shot, well then you're still a refugee. You can't go home. And we shouldn't be forcing people to go home if they're going to be, executed or maligned. But on the other hand, we shouldn't allow people to use refugee status to immigrate when they otherwise wouldn't be able to. And they're not actually interested in just like running from war, they're just interested in economic opportunity. With the Ukrainians specifically, I think the goal should be we take care of them, probably in Eastern European countries. And I think that the American role there is providing money and aid to make sure that and volunteers like Matt Frad have people go over there that are interested and have the time and the ability to take care of them and make sure that the burden isn't falling on the Poles and the Hungarians and the Slovaks, that these people have support from the United States and the UK and France, so that way they can we can spread the burden. But ideally, they stay in Eastern Europe, so that way when the war ends, hopefully very soon, they can go home and rebuild their country and live there. And we should probably not be building permanent apartment complexes for them in Poland because ideally they won't stay there forever. They'll be able to go home soon. So I think
yeah.
I think we should do everything we can to make sure they're safe and comfortable and looked after, with the understanding that this is not a permanent arrangement for their economic enrichment, but we're just providing for their safety.
Yeah,
I think
that makes
some
sense.
Ukrainians we should probably keep in the West. If there's like a pro-Russian government and they would be hurt or something, then obviously we need to make sure that we give refugee status to those people. But when people
Hmm.
can go home, they should go home. That's basically my take.
Yeah, that's a really good take. Um, yeah, I guess this might even be a tougher question, but for those of you who know more about Middle Eastern affairs than I do, how is this different from? I think Jonathan, John, you probably touched on this a little bit in terms in when he said uh, people using the refugee status as a way to get into a better land, basically, rather than as a way to temporarily escape whatever's going on in their country. So, how is what is going on right now with the refugees in Ukraine flooding Poland different from the uh, uh, the I guess I don't know how to exactly say it, but like the immigration of like is Muslims basically from the Middle East. Like Germany has taken in quite a few. Britain has taken in quite a few. Are those the same thing as helping refugees in not right now, or is there a difference? I would say there's a difference, obviously, but um, I don't know enough about Middle Eastern affairs to really say why. I guess.
I can take that one again. I think
Sure.
a
Yeah.
big difference is, Catholic Ukrainians, because well, I don't know who most of the refugees are, but there are a lot of Catholic Ukrainians are much similar culturally and linguistically and religiously to Poles than they are
Hmm.
to than like an Afghan is to the British. So I think that there's
Yeah.
a lot more, and they're also way closer. Like there's a land border between Ukraine and uh, and and Poland. And I mean, as we briefly mentioned, parts of Poland or parts of what have historically been Poland are currently in Ukraine. That's how close they are. Whereas
Yeah.
in the case of Afghanistan and Syria, there really is no close cultural tie between France and Syria. Or I mean, I suppose there are some ties between France and Syria because Syria is a former colony of France, but it's just they're
Yeah.
not as cohesive as a people. And there are plenty of peaceful countries in between Syria and France. And
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
the Syrians and the Afghans don't really seem to have much interest in staying there, which raises the question: are they leaving because of safety reasons? Yeah, I mean they're leaving because of safety reasons, but their destination is determined by like where they want to end up to have a better life. And there's no problem with people wanting a better life. The issue is more that like there's not a moral obligation at that point if a country doesn't want to take you. You don't get to go wherever you want in the world just because you're under threat of military threat. Like you do have a right, I think, to be safe, and I do think that there is an obligation on nations to keep you safe. But if you're going through 10 countries to get to the desired one, you don't have that same claim as being like as running across the border. It's just there's more moral ambiguity in those situations. So I don't think you have the same claim in justice that you do in the case of the Ukrainians moving to Poland.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, as you were talking, about the cultural differences and how it wasn't really as pressing as the Polish crisis right now. I was thinking about illegal immigration from Mexico, where that's not even they don't even pretend to be refugees. Like it's just flat out get smuggled in and go for a better life, basically. Um, I'm not necessarily saying that like we shouldn't let any people in, but um, yeah, it's just so easy. Like it's just so easy to like topple the um, tower of government. To topple the leaning tower of Pisa, I guess, in terms of government. And uh, yeah, immigration seems like a kind of not really like a cancer, but like sort of something that um, yeah, just it's just not it's not it's not really it's not good to live in a place where you lack cultural ties. Like, I mean, this might be me coming from, you know, I'm a white heterosexual, uh, you know, cisgendered male or whatever, but
Based.
growing, but growing up in a Latin mass, like that's the culture. I would feel out of place going to like, a Maronite mass or whatever, and that's okay. Like it's the same thing happening in both cases as Catholics, but I would argue that you should go to the Roman Rite before going to a Maronite mass. Maybe check it out a little bit, but if there's a Roman Rite mass, I would argue that um, you should go to it because of those because your cultural ties there are stronger. Um, and so I feel like the yeah, I feel like letting in the refugees from the Middle Eastern chaos and all of that, like obviously there should be some sort of accommodation for that, but it should be on the understanding that they're going to be going back once the refugee status is lifted. So they shouldn't be like setting up shop and staying permanently in like France, Germany, Britain, because that's just going to erode the culture. And yeah, I mean it's going to erode the culture, um, and make it something worse than either Islam or secularism. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like the current situation in Poland is that the Ukrainian refugees come in and then we sort of let them roam about freely. Um,
Mm,
I mean, they register with like the local government, and the local government can direct them to either like a hotel that has volunteered to take them in, or like a family that has declared to the government that they're willing to take in refugees. A lot of families have declared that they'll just private individuals have said, okay, we have like two spare rooms, we can take in this many people, and then the government just sends those people over. Um, but generally, the practice is you take refugees in, and the government puts them in camps. Um, and I mean that's just not the case in Poland with the Ukrainian refugee crisis, and I think the reason for that is because of the close cultural ties. I don't know how long this sort of like peaceful atmosphere will last. I'm sure that over time tensions will arise, possibly with fuel to the fire being added by the Russian secret services.
mm.
But for now, things are pretty calm. However, like the example of like Middle Eastern refugees or North African refugees in Europe, um, there have been numerous studies that have been done. In fact, there is an entire index of studies that were conducted. If you look up um, diversity plus proximity equals war, it'll give you an entire index of like dozens, scores of academic studies that have been conducted about how having high levels of cultural or ethnic diversity in a small area or in a concentrated area actually erodes social trust and
Huh.
breeds conflict. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
But I thought
yeah, but
diversity was our strength, Jacob.
oh, that's what they've told us, isn't it? It's actually funny. There's this one study that I was reading, and the guy that conducted it was a study that said what I just said. That if you have high levels of diversity, it erodes social trust. Um, and the scientist that was conducting this study waited something like ridiculous, like 20 years to publish the results of the study because he spent 20 years trying to figure out how to frame his results in a way that wouldn't be controversial or seen as racist. But then eventually he figured he couldn't do it and he just gave up and published it anyway.
That's good. Oh.
So I this leads me to a question I've been thinking about a lot, which is there is, I think, a multicultural empire that we're all big fans of that unfortunately no longer exists, and that is the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Uh, do we think that, like, what kept the Holy Roman or not the Holy Roman Empire, but the Austrian Empire together for so long? Do you think that, like, personal loyalty to a monarchy is good? Like, you could have like a sort of a nationalism founded around loyalty to a dynasty, and that can, like, allow for multicultural nations to flourish, or do we think that that's inevitably going to collapse just like the Austrian-Hungarians did, into like rival little ethno states?
That's a very interesting point that you bring up, John. I don't know if you know this, but um, up until up until and including the First World War, um, soldiers and policemen and like local magistrates of the Austro-Hungarian Empire did not swear loyalty to Austria-Hungary. They didn't swear loyalty to the Austro-Hungarian crown. They swore loyalty to the emperor by name.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Um, but the problem with that is we see like the people that came out of Austria-Hungary, especially the nobility, after the collapse of the empire, they were like viciously cosmopolitan.
Yes.
These are people who are probably as hostile to the idea of the nation state as the globalists are.
Yeah, and
Even
I guess my
less.
question is, like, how do we interact with the concept of the Austria-Hungarian Empire? Because I'm a huge fan of, like, this ancient Catholic monarchy that's bringing all these diverse Catholic peoples together. But on the other hand, I can understand I'm a pretty parochial guy. I was talking with Robert the other day about how I was supported our particular state to become its own nation, and so I understand, like, sort of
Alright.
these parochial concerns that people have for their own
I'm not
their.
gonna say what that particular state is.
It's the best state, so everyone will immediately understand what that one is. And
The best country in the world.
it is not Texas. I'll put it like that. It is not Texas. So, but I don't know. I'm like really in tension between my loyalty to the Habsburg versus, this idea of, like, I do sympathize with these ethnic groups, but at the same time, when you look at what happened after the fall of Austria-Hungary, I mean, not immediately, but well, I mean, immediately, and then also following up in the 1990s with Yugoslavia and the breakup of Yugoslavia, it seems like it was really bad to foment these sort of nationalisms, because they do cause all kinds of conflict between peoples that, in my opinion, would be stronger together. I don't think that's universally true, but I think that that's true in the case of Austria-Hungary. So I don't know. I mean,
So in the funny thing, Brittany is not allied to England right now. They're only allied to Utrecht, which is like they have 4,000 soldiers. Brittany is 8,000. So I'm preparing to conquer them.
nice, big brain
First
move.
action of the game. Yeah, I don't know. This probably isn't related to the question at all. Well, it's kind of tangentially related. But I would say, like, yeah, it really depends on what you define culture as. Like I think in the medieval ages, like, I think I think the culture was Catholic. Like, obviously, it was a different culture than the Maronites had or other Catholic um, rites, but um, Catholicism was integral to the culture. Like, you couldn't be part of um, like you had to basically you couldn't be a part of medieval Europe unless you were Catholic, basically. Like, I know that there were some Jews as well. There were Jewish communities and stuff like that, but um, I guess my point is like, in a completely secular society, what do people define? Like, what do people look at to define their culture? Is it the nation as a whole, or is it some Marxian, like, grand idea about uniting everyone together, or what is it? And I think that disparity between the cultures, especially with respect to the um, Muslim immigration into Europe, I think that is into a Europe that is, I would say, you know, definitely trending in an atheistic direction, like that culture interacting, that culture in the culture in Europe right now interacting with the culture of the Muslims is just, dynamite because the the French don't think of them the French don't think of themselves as Catholics anymore. They think of themselves as Frenchmen, in nationalistic terms, and and same with other countries too. But because at least for people who have lost religion, so yeah, and then Islam, like bringing that into a secular society, like oh my goodness, like medieval Europe fought against Islam, for that was everyone was agreed with that. Like there would be petty squabbles, whatever, but when it came to Islam, they recognized that as a that they recognized that as a culture that was incompatible with, the Catholic faith, and that's why they didn't, you know, let them in, and that's why they also went out on a crusade against them partially. And I'm not saying like if you're Muslim, like you should be beheaded or whatever. Like I'm just saying it depends on how you define your culture. If your culture was, Catholic, like it was in Hungarian, in the Habsburg dynasty, then that is what allows you to bring those diverse peoples together under one flag. The fact that they're all Catholic and striving for that. Even though things we traditionally think of as cultural, like ethnics or like your ethnic origin or whatever else, even though those might be different, like Catholicism and it is the unifying thread there, I think.
Well, I think it's important to note that even in the age of Christendom, like Joan of Arc stresses that like she represents the French, like the French people. So there
Yeah.
has to be a concept of Frenchness and French nationhood, even within this greater Christendom that makes the French distinct. Um, but I do think you're right in the sense that like yeah, there was like the overarching identity that bound everything together despite regional differences was Catholicism. But the problem is we are so far removed from sanity at this
Yeah.
point that like at this point like becoming Jacobins is a step in the right direction. Like we've gone further than the Jacobins.
We've gone a
Um
lot further than the Jacobins.
like if you look at like the Jacobin conception of the state, it's basically what the National Front in France is trying to establish and go back to. Like they just want to become like Jacobin nationalists. Um, they're like they basically say like because the Front National is sort of getting called to arms. Um,
Nice.
That's my call to arms, by the way. We're
yeah.
going to war.
Who are you
Okay,
going to war with?
We're going to war with the Czechs, the Bohemia, which is
I
a.
was gonna go to war with the Teutonic Knights, but okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bohemia. Well, they have the Hussites.
I'm giving you territory, so this isn't going to be a complete waste of your time.
Yeah.
Are you okay with Silesia?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Sorry, I just I have a PU on the Czechs, so I wanted to jump on that
Yeah.
because once I have Bohemia, I can operate a little bit more independently here. I should.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead.
As I was saying, like the Front National right now is they're secular nationalists, but what they're trying to do is they're basically saying like the large amounts of Muslim immigrants that are not assimilating in France are completely rejecting the very basis of secular French nationalism, which is the État-nation, the nation state, or really it's sort of like a civic nationalism that the French have always, or at least since the time of the Revolution, have embraced. And they're saying we need to go back and try to enforce the revolutionary values of we're all French if we agree on the values of the Republic. That's the Jacobin position, but it's a reactionary position from the point of view of the postmodernists and the globalists.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um,
That reminds me, in my high school government class, there was this one day the teacher was defining right wing and left wing, and the definition he gave was a conservative wants to keep things the same, reactionary wants to go back to the past, liberals want some change, and radicals want more change. And he said that the conservatives and reactionaries on the right, liberals and radicals on the left. And I thought at the time that definition doesn't really make any sense. Like, deforestation is objectively a change, but is deforestation left wing? Is it?
No.
Is reforestation is objectively going back to the past, but is reforestation reactionary and right wing? Or at least
Yes.
is it all
Yes.
is it always reactionary and right wing?
Yes. It's always reactionary.
Well, Chad, yes.
Indeed.
But I guess in this case, that theory does hold some water. Because
Speak.
what was once the radical left is now the right, or one part of the right.
It reminds me of memes I've seen online where it's like it will show like the new gay flags, which are like the super incredibly ugly, like brown and rainbow and
oh,
intersex and just crazy looking, and then it's like reject modernity, captioning that flag, and then it just has like the ordinary rainbow flag and it's like return to tradition, and it's like this is going to be the conservative position in 10 years, and it's like, yeah, unfortunately.
A reminder that Donald Trump did not oppose gay marriage in 2016.
good
Yeah.
point. Yeah. Yeah, I think Chesterton had a quote on this. Uh, yeah, I don't remember the quote, but it was something like, um, uh, conservatives want to keep. No, yeah, I don't remember the quote, but there's a quote on this by Chesterton, which I think is kind of funny considering this was like 100 years ago.
Is it like conservatives want to preserve the results of the battles they lost yesterday, or something like that?
Um, Maybe. I don't think it was quite like that, but it was. That's the gist of it. Yeah. Not. He didn't say it exactly like that, but yeah, it's basically the same thing he said. Um, yeah.
I think
All
that's
right.
the problem with like Burkeanism actually,
Oh. Wow. Okay. What's your
because
take on that?
Edmund Burke, like he's sort of thought of as the founder of, or the father of conservatism, based on the fact that he wrote his considerations on the revolution in France, um, where he was sort of anti. But the thing is, like he was a member of the Whig Party, which is the Liberal Party in England. Um, and really, his critique of the French Revolution isn't so much of what the revolution was trying to accomplish, but how they did it. He said that basically his position was that generally all of the things that they wanted to accomplish were fine. They were just trying to do it too quickly and too inorganically.
Hmm.
Well, the
Um,
revolution was non organic development.
It was not.
Yeah, I mean, I think I read like 15 pages of Burke in one of my college classes because they think that reading a tenth of an author's work is enough to get help you know what he's saying. Um, but yeah, I think I remember. Was it him or Locke? Oh, it might have been Locke. No, 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 it was him. He was Burke was like defending the orange. I think it was the Orange Revolution. No, the
The
orange.
Glorious Revolution.
Yeah, something like
That
that.
is it. The one that puts the House of Orange in the British monarchy.
Yeah, like 1689.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that one. he was saying like he was defending that as a matter of principle, um, and I just kind of wondered at that because obviously before the um, the Orange Revolution, uh, or I should say the Glorious Revolution, um, yeah, the state England was Catholic for a little bit. Um, so
Well,
yeah,
yeah, you have to realize like that this is exactly the point. For Burke, the status quo after the Glorious Revolution is the status quo.
yeah.
He would be against the reestablishment of the Stuarts because that for him would be a revolution.
Wow. But
Or the,
an actual revolution is not a revolution. Man. John, I know you've read some Burke.
I have
Do you
read
have any
Burke.
takes? Okay.
Um, I think Burke is very conservative for his age. He is, I think, very anti-secular, which I think would surprise people because he's a Brit. Like he's not on the continent. And
Yeah.
Britain has historically been the most, I would say, in quotes, liberal European government. And I do think it's been a while since I've read Burke, but what was the most surprising is like Burke seems to be a very big fan of the Catholic Church in France, which he calls the Gallican Church, which is kind of entertaining. But and he definitely is a big fan of like the nobility. I think he does take like substantive issues with some of the reforms that the revolutionaries want, particularly secularizing France. I think he's pretty opposed to that, like objectively. Like I don't think his issue is just that they're doing it too fast. I think in large part his issue with it is that he's doing it that they're doing it at all. An additional thing that I think is important to contextualize Burke, and as an American, I identify myself with the Anglos. I know that Eques has some beef with the Anglos sometimes, but I'll offer a moderate defense, which is that like the English Parliament and like the governmental structures that England had in the late 18th century and even to a lesser extent to this day are not like they are organic developments from like the medieval structures. So they are really like the House of Commons is like would be equivalent roughly to the French Third Estate, and the House of Lords is roughly equivalent to the Second and the First Estates because you have like the bishops and the nobility in there. So I do think that England gets a bad rap sometimes for being like too progressive and too liberal, but I do think it is. I think that the English model is a great one, and I think I was actually telling Robert this earlier. I think that if I were to design a constitution, it would resemble closely the 18th century English constitution, because I do
Wow.
think that
Constitution for the best country in the world.
for the best country in the world, yeah, our state, if it were to become independent. And I do like the balance because you do have sort of like a weaker executive. It's not absolutist, and I'm doing air quotes, quote unquote, because absolutism is always something of a fantasy. And it has buy-in from like the important, like the grandees of your society, the people that really matter, the educated, the wealthy, the people that have the time, the energy, and the ability to really be involved in government and who are footing most of the bill for your government. But it also does take into account popular opinion, just at a much reduced amount to like the popular democracies that we have now, that are really just very easily manipulated by the media and sort of the whims of the people. But it does take into account. So it has elements of that stability that the monarchy provides, while also having sort of the guidance of an aristocracy like the Roman Republic did, while also taking into account some of the more modern concepts of popular opinion. So you're not completely detached from popular feelings. I don't know. I'm curious to hear Equus's take on my complimentary attitude towards the constitutional monarchy in England. But
I appreciate your critique of the critique of England. Mostly because I have a similar criticism of the sort of historiography that surrounds the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Um, and the reason being, like, the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth is often portrayed as like the super progressive liberal state, like the precursor to modern republicans, or republics, sorry. Um, and that's simply not the case. It's more to do with the fact that, like, it was an outgrowth of a traditional, like, estates based medieval monarchy. Um, but the reason why it's seen as progressive is because it's this estate-based medieval monarchy that was completely thrown off balance with a organically developing power of the nobility that eventually got out of hand, but still one that where the nobility's power got out of hand. And I think, like, in England, it was the same thing, except it was the power of the commons that got out of hand. And that's still a critique, it's just a different critique.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I'm happy that you brought up the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth because I am a huge fan of the Polish Lithuanian model as well. I think it does a really good job of balancing the interests of society. And I'd also echo this to give the Hungarians some love. The Hungarians, I think, also had a pretty good system, which is, like a big aristocracy. Like what in Poland was it like what, 5-10% of the population?
Yes, 10.
10%, which is huge relative to most. Because what are the other ones, like 1 to 3% maybe?
Yeah, England is like 3% in, like, the height of like the Glorious Revolution.
Yeah, so like much more expansive, much more social buy-in. And I mean realistically, like even in the United States, most of the people that are really politically active is probably like 10 to 20% of the population that really should be voting, in my opinion. So I mean, I think in general, your society is going to be run by the top 10 to 20% no matter what you do. So you might as well formalize that so you don't have people that aren't really paying attention, messing around and sort of just doing whatever they're told to by the talking heads on the cable television or the latest broadside straight off of the printing press talking about how faith alone is good or whatever, depending
Yeah.
on your specific historical era.
So, John Eques, you're taking over Bohemia. I'm planning on conquering Brittany. Um, Raphael, you preparing some action in Granada?
I'm waiting for our truce to expire.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that you can start building your spy network.
yeah, I've got a
And
claim against them.
oh, that's good. Well,
Yeah.
I'm about to get my claim on Brittany. I'm just gonna build my army up a little bit.
Oh, England surrendered the Maine?
Oh, Brittany is allied with Aragon now. That's no good.
Oh, that's
Wow.
exciting.
Because I don't want to fight Aragon, but they're allied with Utrecht. Utrecht is allied with Brittany and Dortmund, and
Wait.
Dortmund is
Why
tiny.
not Colin Castile? You and Raphael can tag team them. Because if he's just waiting around, why not get in a good war
Yeah, I
with
mean,
Aragon?
yeah, I've got some troops. Let's do this thing.
So you would fight Aragon.
Yep.
No, if you wait long enough, you can just get Aragon. Like there is a decision you can make. You just need to like have 100 legitimacy, level 10 in administrative technology, and Aragon can't have grown by too much.
Well, it's gonna take me forever to get to 10, so I'll just
Like
go in right away.
I figure there's a way around this. If I just declare war on Utrecht, but I can't get a claim on them.
Yeah, it's fine. You can go for Brittany, and then I should be able to do
Wait,
Aragon
Eastern
only
England.
has 19,000 soldiers.
can you actually declare? Would I be called in if you declared one Utrecht though? I'm the Holy Roman Emperor.
Yeah, that thing. I guess I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
go for
just
Brittany.
declare war on Brittany once I get my army beefed up.
Sweet. Sounds good. Yeah, and returning to the conversation, um, what are people's takes? Like, I know people being like the representation of the people is something that um, we're all kind of ingrained with growing up in America. Um, but yeah, I think like I've been leaning way more towards the monarchy side recently. I know I talked with Equus a little bit um, a few months ago, and we were talking about monarchy, and I was a little hesitant. Um, I was a little hesitant to say like, hey, like what this country is doing, 360 million people is like completely totally wrong. But in recent months, yeah, I'm growing more uh fond of the idea, I guess. So, do people have like takes on that? Like, should be some democracy, some monarchy, just monarchy, or yeah, I mean, I guess I'll leave it at that.
The
Okay.
question is like, where in the world are you gonna find a king?
It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Well, I mean, where do you normally find kings? Like in to borrow the cringe Enlightenment phrase, as man is emerging from the state of nature.
Well, what you do
Philosophically,
is
maybe.
whenever you need to find a king, you find some random prince in Germany, you pluck him up, and then you make him king of your country. That's what they did in the 19th century, at least. Am I wrong? I feel like that's what they're always doing. Equus, you know history pretty well too.
That's true. That's
Like,
and you know who started that tradition? It was the English in the 18th or in the late 16th 17th century.
yeah, it's like I don't even know where they find these guys. Like, I don't know. Like, how do they go about choosing them? You know what I mean?
It
Because some
was
of
it
them
was
are not
literally
really.
just because they were Protestant.
Oh no, I mean
Oh, fringe.
like Emperor Maximilian of Mexico. He's just like some random German prince that the French pluck up and put on like the Mexican throne. Like I don't like how did they go about choosing that guy, you know? Or like the King of Greece. Like I don't know exactly the story about the King of Greece, but I'm pretty sure that they were Germans, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or
Yeah,
like the
yeah, like
Romanians. Like the Romanians I think still have the Hohenzollern. I can never pronounce their name. But like the Prussians, like the Prussian royal family. They're currently running Brandenburg in game. The Hohenzollern.
yeah.
Yeah, like how do they pick those guys? You know, that's my question. Like, did they just kind of like have a conference of all the German princes and they have like a lottery and they're like, well, you get to be king of Romania, you get to be emperor of Mexico, you get to be king of Greece. Like, what's going on there? I don't know.
I don't remember the exact story with the Empire of Mexico, but I think what they tried to do was they were trying to basically get the Austrians on their side. Um the French were, that is. Because he was like a Habsburg, wasn't he?
I think he maybe. I know it's Emperor Louis Napoleon that puts him on the throne,
Yeah, yeah.
but I don't know much more than that. I know he was like kind of a liberal, which was ironic because like all of the Mexican conservatives got like super excited because they're like, yes, we're finally gonna have an emperor again, and we'll be great, and it will be epic, and we can own the libs. And then he comes in and he turns out to be a lib, and then all of the Mexican conservatives are like super disenchanted, and like all of the Mexican liberals like hated him because uh, because he was like he was like a foreign emperor, and they're like, we don't want you. But
How does it so Jonathan, John, you were mentioning um the Britain and Lithuania as constitutions that you would put weight behind. What exactly do those two say about say on this question, I guess?
um, well, as I said, I would call them mixed systems. So there's definitely some popular oversight, not in the sense that like modern like universal suffrage popular, and I don't mean like men and women. I mean like having every single even universal manhood suffrage. So like just like everyone voting is like a very new concept. I don't think it even really exists before like 1900 anywhere really. I mean, it starts to emerge in the United States, but like even like after the Civil War, there were like lots of people fighting about like what kind of education level you needed to vote and stuff. And I'm not talking about like, I mean, obviously the United States has an unfortunate history of racial exclusion, but I'm talking about like even like if you're like a white man, you could not vote in the United States in a lot of state elections, like in the late 19th century. So like this idea that everyone votes regardless of property or education is like a super new concept historically. So
Yeah.
when I mean republicanism, I mean like in the sense of like Roman or Athenian
Uh,
democracy, which are very
okay.
restrictive. And basically what that means is that you have to be educated and you have to own property to vote.
Also,
And
everything is constrained by like religious ideas of patriotism, at least in
yeah,
the Roman and Athenian model.
so like you would have like basically like important people who know what they're doing are the ones that vote, not just like, you know, your random person. Not that there's anything like morally deficient in those people. It's just like they probably don't have the ability to vote because they're, you know, living their life, getting married, having kids, you know, working, and they're not like super well educated, and they don't have the time or the inclination to do that. And I think that I would basically have like a pseudo republican model with a monarch. In Europe, I would support the restoration of monarchies with the preservation of parliaments of like some kind. So, like in France, I'd love to see the restoration of the Bourbon or the Orleans or even the Bonapartes. I don't really have like a strong opinion. Just put somebody in there, and I'd have them basically take the role of Macron now. Like they would just like you'd have the king, and he'd basically perform the role of a president. I bet there's still a parliament. I think Germany is a bit more complicated. I don't know what I would do there. I also care less because they're Protestant. Like their royal family would be Protestant, so I don't really care. With Russia, I'd love to see the restoration of the czars. And there's like real, like I think that's honestly that if you're going to see a major country restore the monarchy, it would be Russia.
Wow.
And I'd like to see a return of the Romanovs, absolutely. But in the United States, I think it becomes way more complicated because we don't really have a history of monarchism. I mean, you could steal somebody, like you could, I don't know, like I mean, I think among monarchists, Louis the 20th, who's the Bourbon pretender to the French throne, is very popular. I mean, you could just say like, hey, if the French don't want you, come over here. I think that's kind of a meme. I don't think that we should do that. We're not French. We shouldn't LARP as like the French. We shouldn't bring a bourbon to the Americas. And even if you did, it has zero popular support in the United States outside of like maybe a few people at your local trad parish would support it. But other than that, you got nothing. So
Just at me next time.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, well, then like one thing that a lot of Catholics will suggest is like, oh, we need to bring back the Stuarts. Like that was a meme 200 years ago. It's super anachronistic now. Like the Stuarts are never coming back, and like their main line died out. Even like it doesn't make sense to bring back the Stuarts. So I think that like the most realistic path to like taking like an actually ancient royal family and restoring them to like having like a monarchy in the United States is if you just bring back like the British royal family and make Queen Elizabeth II Queen of America, because I mean she's pretty popular in the United States. People get interested in the royal family, and there's like a historical connection there and like a current cultural connection there. Like Americans are very invested in the royal family. Like we care about them, and like they're the closest thing that America has to a royal family. So if you're really dead set on bringing back like an ancient European monarchy, you need to bring back the Krauts and go back to Queen Elizabeth and all of her line. But I don't really think that that's desirable or really feasible. What I would do, and also like I don't know what other people think about this. I don't really care about like the ancient pedigree. It's cool, but for me, it's mostly like just kind of an aesthetic thing. Like what I care about is the actual constitutional structure of the government. So what I
Yeah,
would
I
do
absolutely agree.
as like an American who admires monarchical systems is I would basically I would get rid of like I would extend presidential term limits basically. I would probably have you elect the president once for like 20 years, because I think one of the biggest benefits of monarchy that I like from a substantive point is that it gives you stability in two different ways. One, it gives you stability in terms of like the length of time. Like you don't have it so you're like flipping your political control every 4 to 8 years, which is what we have now. You have a Democrat and a Republican, and it's like schizophrenia, where the United States acts completely different depending on who's in power, and it's just not stable. You get the worst of both worlds because you don't have one political agenda seen through to its conclusion. You have two separate ones that just completely reverse everything the other one does every 3 seconds. So you never have the ability to actually make long-term plans. It's always just looking forward to the next election. So what I would do is I would keep the presidency as it exists now. I would just have them be elected for like 120, like 10, 15, 20-year term, like probably 20 years. So that way you can really just have like one person guiding America for a long time on their agenda. And the thing that that does is it creates incentives to not be like as focused on short-term political gain and like owning whichever political enemy you have, because you actually have to deal with the people who are
Yeah.
your political opponents. You can't just like shunt them off to a side. You have to like negotiate and debate with them, and like you become more focused on the long term. And I think that's a
Wow.
real big advantage. And what I would do, I would also go with like some of like the stylistic changes to sort of give it the romance of like a monarchy without actually having like the hereditary aspect. I would basically like I would change the name from president to emperor. So instead of like going to vote for president of the United States, you would vote for emperor. It's completely cosmetic, but it
Not
does
Empress.
well. I mean, assuming it's a man that's elected, so you have basically an emperor of America elected every 20 years, and like you'd have to like get to which adds like a large degree of burden on that person because it's like you're not just president who you're not like just somebody who was chosen by the people. Like you're an emperor. Like you're very powerful. You need to be understand the weight of your responsibilities, and I think the term emperor really drives that home. And then I
Raphael, are you ready for a war against Aragon?
Yep.
I'm ready for a war
Do it.
against Brittany.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good.
Oh, I think you should get a general for your third army.
Okay.
Get your boats out to where you want them to be.
okay, so
Be the other side.
Jacob, I've got a question for you. What provinces
Right.
do you want here from this peace deal?
Um, well, let's see. Let's look at resources.
Oh, Bohemia is right defeated.
I can
Yeah, and I guess. Oh, sorry.
oh,
Go ahead, John.
I consider all of the vassals as your territory. So like even if we can't get you all of them, I will give you all of them as soon as I can.
Okay, well,
But just choose the best ones you want right now. Actually, can you make peace and take them yourself right now?
wait, let me see.
Oh, that's annoying. They're technically part of the Holy Roman Empire, but I'll take the hit.
So Robert.
Wait, if
Oh, sorry.
I leave the war, you're gonna lose a lot of the
The war
victory
score.
points.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, how about I just give you? Are you okay with like all of Opal?
Um,
Let's see. Oh, there's glass in Lignica. If you want that, I'll give you that too. But
yeah, that'd be nice.
cool. So what do you want me to focus on? Because I can only give you 3 provinces, I think.
Okay, well then just give me the Duchy of Apole, just the whole thing.
Nice. It'd be weird if Poland didn't have a roll call or what is that?
Wrocław?
Yes, I think that's how you would pronounce it. Sorry. Cool. There we are.
So, Robert,
Oh,
my truce also expired with Granada just now, but I can go all in on Aragon.
one war at a time. Two ways.
Yeah.
One thing I learned is a war on two fronts really is a bad idea. Unless
Okay.
both of the fronts are really, really weak.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, Granada can wait.
All right. Um. So this
Just
is.
get,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
should get your. If you're confident enough to fight the Aragon's fleet, you should get your boats over into the Mediterranean,
Okay.
because that's where theirs are going to be.
All right.
Yeah, I
All
think
right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I keep cutting
w
people off.
with the US, there's also the route of like basically getting a Caesar, like a collapse of the constitutional system that we have now, and just getting like a strong man to take the reins, and then eventually that just turns into a monarchy de facto.
Yeah, I think also in like the long run, the goal of my system would be to transform the United States into some form of hereditary monarchy, which I think is kind of inevitable. Once you have like a 20-year term, people are going to start being like, well, we call him emperor.
Yeah,
Let's,
I mean, you're
you
gonna
know,
get like everyone's gonna die in office basically.
yeah.
Yeah. I guess my question was going to be, how would you like fit the Catholic Church in under that scheme? Like, um, I know a little bit about. I probably know a little bit more about like this than integralism than anybody here, but I think everyone's pretty. Everyone knows what it is. I think. Um, how would and specifically in with America, how would that work if you were able to get an emperor in?
So
Like, how would that work with
in
Protestants
certain way,
and
low grade integralism I think is easier than like fundamentally reordering the American
okay,
constitutional system. So for
okay,
example, like one plan I've been thinking about recently that's very practical. Everyone on this podcast talking right now, everyone who listens could be part of this. Is the first step of an integralist country is defunding the public schools. So as I think most people know, the way that public schools in the United States work is they're funded on a local level. So people will pay property tax to their state and local governments, and then that government then they use that money to pay for schooling, for education. It's one of the most important, if not the most important function that state and local governments perform in the United States. And but the thing in the United States is there are a lot of people who are homeschooled or go to private school. And frequently, like the biggest supplier of private education in the United States is the Roman Catholic Church. Now,
oh really?
yeah, so there are a lot
Wow.
of problems with Catholic schools,
Uh,
but
yeah.
not. I don't know about you guys. I trust the Roman Catholic Church to be running education much more than I trust the public schools to run education. So my
To a
plan
certain extent, yeah.
so my plan is essentially this. What you do is you start to take like money from public schools and you give them to vouchers because people that are sending their children to private schools or to homeschool still have to pay property taxes. So what you would do is you would basically give them that money back. You would refund them that money. So whatever amount of money the state delegates to students, you would basically just give them a check, say like this goes to private school tuition, and then like if they send their kids to Catholic school, they take that money that would generally be used for their kid in public school in a state school, and they would put it to public for private school tuition, or like let's say they're homeschooled, they would use that to buy books and like help educate their children in a homeschool. And basically, what that does is that takes money away from the state schools. So what you would do is you would keep siphoning off money from this tax revenue, and you would keep distributing it, keep distributing it, keep distributing it. So you would start to basically prioritize private school over public school. So as the public schools get worse, people would keep wanting to send their kids to private school until you could literally just completely get rid of private school or of public schools, which is legal. Like if you won a school board election, you could just dissolve public schools, like completely dissolve them. Like you could get rid of the school district and you could just give people money and force them to go to private schools. You don't need to win at the state level.
Well,
You don't need to win at the national level. The only thing you need to do is win a school board election. You could do this. Of course, the reason it doesn't happen is because it's very unpopular. So you would need to basically get people acclimated to it. But I think that if you got a large scale movement that got rid of state schools and a lot of the damaging things that they do with like I don't know, like teaching critical race theory, teaching about like training people to be like trans, right? You could take all of the money away from that, destroy the teachers unions, destroy like the state school apparatus and the propaganda apparatus that it basically supports, and you could take all that money and like the beneficiaries of that are going to be homeschoolers who are generally, pretty good, pretty solid people, and Catholic schools, and to a lesser extent, like Protestant schools, because those are like most people that go to private school go to parochial schools. So you're basically taking all of that money that's going to our ideological enemies and you're transforming it into Catholic and Lutheran schools. And also, like, you don't have to worry about school prayer bans and all of that stuff because guess what? You can have school prayer in private schools. So all of a sudden, you're taking, like, if you make the Catholic schools and the Protestant schools and homeschooling better options than public schools, all of the people are going to pull their kids out of public school and send them to private school, even if they're not Catholic or religious. So you suddenly take like a bunch of gay teachers unions from being the ones that are educating children and you give it to nuns and Catholic priests and Protestant ministers. The thing is, this is easy. It's not easy to do, but you can do it at a local level. And I think that's the
Yeah.
first step to integralism is putting the church in charge of education. And the way you do this is you just have a campaign against public schools and you say it's all about school choice. We just want people to have options. When really what you want them to do is take their kids and put them in Catholic school.
well, campaign like a moderate, govern like. All right, Raphael, you finally ready for the war?
Yep.
Brittany doesn't have any new allies, or I'm declaring war.
Sweet.
So before I declare war, I'm going to pause so I can get all my marching done at the same time.
Okay. I will do that too. Yeah, that's
Pause.
pretty well.
I can't seem to pause.
Here, let me pause.
All right.
All right, there we go.
First, declare war. First, declare war on Brittany. And confirm.
All right. Sweet. Here
Now
we
I'm
go.
going troops in. All right, your troops movements. Oh, I guess you're the one who pauses
Oh, okay.
because you're the one who paused.
There we go. Okay. So yeah, going back to the discussion, that was absolutely brilliant, John. That was amazing. I have yeah, that's because obviously there's an idea in Catholicism about uh um oh, I'm forgetting the name, but um basically like power at the lower levels is better than power. It's this principle of subsidiarity. Power at the lower levels is better than power of the highest. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Wow. I just that was really good. Um, dang. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in terms of I would also say like um yeah, I do you so John, do you think it's realistic at all? Like how would you go about doing that, I guess?
I think it's very realistic. Like you've
Okay.
seen how upset people are about the school boards in recent months with like COVID and like critical race theory. I think a lot of people distrust the public schools. And I think that if you really start asking the fundamental question of like why do we have public schools? Like we should be enabling parents to have free choice. I think you can win on a lot of fronts because people dislike public schools for all kinds of reasons. And I think you can unify a pretty broad coalition behind this idea. And the thing is, like, you don't need to use, like, we need to make everybody, we need to basically put, you would not probably sell it to most people as, like, oh, what we need to do is we need to put the Catholic Church in charge of education. What you would just do is you would use, like, the typical language that the Republican Party has already, which is we need school choice. Like, we want parents to be the ones that make these decisions. And basically, what that would, but the effect of that would basically be Catholic schools are going to get a ton of new people. The Catholic Church is going to be responsible for more education than it ever has been, and like the teachers unions and like the gayness of it will be completely basically excised from our well, not completely excised. I'm sure there are still going to be private schools like that, but will be greatly limited. What you need to do is you need to stop making public schools the default and start making parochial schools the default. That's the big thing.
Yeah,
And I think it
that's
is
a good
doable.
point.
I think you just need to always harp on the problems with public schools, focus on school choice, and you can get people into Catholic schools.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
even
apparently, I'm at war with Naples too. Oh yeah, because it's a personal union. I guess keep that in mind, Raphael.
Yeah.
Fighting against the Neapolitans too.
I think an important way of looking at politics generally is you need to look at it in terms of hostile and friendly institutions. And right now we have like two major friendly institutions in the United States, and that is the police, who are generally right wing, and the church, or the churches. And by that I mean the Catholic Church and the various Protestant churches. And even then, we get a lot of people that are just not even on our side. But
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is we need
Dang.
to start flipping institutions. And I think that the one that is the easiest for the right to flip is the education institutions. And if we control the schools, we control what children are being taught, we have a lot of power. And that's what we need to start working on is we really need to focus on education, education, education. Education is the number one issue if the right wants to start making progress in the broader social, cultural, and political war that we're in right now. If we can
Wow.
put the Catholic Church in charge of education, then we're we're on the first step to making some real progress.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I honestly don't have anything to say. That's really good. Um, wow. Yeah, I mean, uh, obviously, like I was homeschooled, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody watching. A common misconception is that you kind of sit around like raiding the fridge all day, which is partially true, but uh, you have way more time to study because you don't have to burn like 7 hours on classes. Like you can just do your homework all day and then get it done early, and then you're good to go for the afternoon. Um, and yeah, like you also don't aren't like bored stiff in a school. That is kind of a joke, basically, um, and is also like really hostile to what you believe. Um, so yeah, I would definitely support that. That's a really great take. Um, I guess returning to the oh crap, I'm gonna get
Oh, they're
destroyed though.
attacking you. Yeah. You should
Oh
just run
man.
away.
Guys,
Okay.
I did a really stupid thing while you were talking.
You broke your alliance with me.
I didn't mean to do that. It just sort of auto made me to do that. Um,
I think the game probably thought that I didn't join you in the war, but I actually did.
yeah, it also doesn't allow me to wait. It says you dislike us, so I can't send you another offer for alliance. No, but the stupid thing that I did was that I declared war on the Teutonic Knights, but I forgot to click on a Casus Belli.
Oh, so you're no CB in it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh.
no, no, it says Polish conquest of Tuchel. You have a war goal.
Oh. Oh, okay.
I think you're fine. You would have had a stab hit if you no C beat him.
Oh, I did.
Oh, you did get
I
a
got to
stab hit.
like yeah, I got to like -3.
Oh
It's
whoa,
weird.
yeah, that's strange.
And it made me break through your my alliance with you. I don't know. Maybe the game's like tweaking out or something.
Probably.
Is everyone on August 31st? Mine is
Yes.
stuck on.
Yeah, I'm on
Yes.
August
September
30.
1st.
Yeah, mine's
There
September.
September,
we
yeah.
Yeah.
go. Okay, I'm gonna get destroyed.
Equus, I do have a historical question for you. If you can right click on Volgast right now, the leader is apparently Count Vardislav.
You should just run away from that battle as soon as you can. Then just
Yeah.
send it to that one siege.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Vartisław.
yeah, like Gurf or something like this.
Griff, yeah.
It looks like a Slavic name,
It
but
is a
it's
Slavic name.
so are the Slavs are Pomeranians, are they Slavic?
So, um, the Grand Dukes of Pomerania, and you can see the same dynasty rules Stettin.
Yeah.
Um, the Grand Dukes of Pomerania were originally Polish dukes, but when Poland was fractured into different sort of duchies, it's sort of like a Game of Thrones Seven Kingdoms kind of period
Okay.
in Polish history. Pomerania never rejoined until like like after World War II. Um, but yeah, so they actually they became Germanized. The Griffites became Germanized. Uh, I mean, like eventually, like probably like in the 14th century, but they kept naming their sons things like Casimir and like Stanislav until like the 18th century.
That's pretty based.
Yeah.
All right, I have one more question on on monarchy. So, um, I've been watching a lot of a series called Yes Prime Minister, which is or Yes Minister, which is really funny, and it's based off of um, basically how the government of Britain runs everything is run by like assistant secretaries behind the scenes rather than the prime minister or the cabinet members. Um, and they sort of take the view that like cabinet ministers are sort of just puppets of the civil service basically, and civil service makes all the decisions because they're the experts and they're the ones who don't get reelected every you know 4 years or so. And obviously like that's they went way over the edge on that, for comedic effect.
Yeah.
But I think it's I do think the idea that whoever the emperor is should be qualified for it. I think that's um like a good take because um if you think about like engineering, like would you vote for someone to go into engineering? Like no, you would want them to, have an engineering degree. What about an architect? Would you just pick a random guy off the street and have him be architect? No, you want someone who's actually studied architecture and knows how to build buildings that won't collapse on people. Um, and in the same way, um, and well, this is also pops up in Plato in his Republic right now that
The
we're going through
captain
right
of the
now.
ship.
Yeah, exactly. So, captain of the ship. So, yeah, he said he points out, obviously his famous message on this is, well, we should have philosopher kings, um, kings who are like politically savvy to deal with political situations, but also love the sight of truth, and are committed to upholding that. Um, so like I guess I guess I'm just wondering like should that be the goal to shoot for something like that? Someone who has qualifications you know like a judge does or an architect or an engineer, or
Yeah.
does uh does it should it be left up to the people for once in 20 every 20 years?
So, Raphael, I'd recommend you move your fleet to the Gulf of Valencia. So right now you're being slowed down in the siege because you don't have
Ah,
a blockade. I think you can.
sure.
Not entirely sure how well that fight would go.
Yeah, I have a lot
Um,
of cogs, unfortunately.
you do have 4 heavy ships though, but not very many galleys. I don't really know.
All
If you
right.
think you can win,
All right. Well, we'll try it.
Yeah, Raphael, to answer your question, I think it's a good attack on democracy that like, why should we be valuing popularity? Like why like whose idea was it to make government by a popularity contest instead of like who's qualified? Um,
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit reticent to embrace this sort of philosopher king technocratic analysis because of just like the cultural and historical context in which we live, which like the people who are really advocating for like, oh, you need to be the expert, like you need the experts to govern, are like promoting some very destructive things.
Like,
Uh,
Yeah.
do you want to be ruled by a certain doctor whose name rhymes with Anthony Fauci?
yeah,
Only rhymes with
exactly.
it though. Only rhymes with it though.
Yeah, it's just I don't think like the rule by experts and qualifications is like the best way to do government. I thought about this a bit, and I think a sort of an interesting sort of hybrid approach, and the approach that I would take is what I would do is I'd have like a good sized chunk of the population, not most people, not even like a large minority, but I'd say like, 3 to 20% of the population, basically, who is like highly educated, generally educated, like they have a common culture, they have a common understanding, they have a common class consciousness, they have the means, the ability, and the time to devote to being considering government and being invested in government, and like they're generalists. They're not specialists. They're not like
Mhm.
Anthony Fauci where they're like only focused on epidemiology and that's the only thing they consider and they have this like sort of tunnel vision on that specific thing. They're very broad. They have a very broad understanding of history and theology and philosophy and culture and sort of like all the issues that are presenting the nation. And then they would make the decisions on how to run the country. So like a more aristocratic view, where it's not
Ah, I
ruled by
see.
experts or by the populace at large, but ruled by like a very Renaissance man sort of government, where they're not specialists, they're generalists who are advised hopefully by specialists who do have a very nuanced understanding of the specific areas that they're targeting. They provide advice to that group, and then that group of generalists makes the decision.
Hmm.
So like more
Interesting.
of like a small narrow elite that has a broad understanding of a lot of different issues, and are advised by experts but not ruled by the experts. because experts
Okay.
aren't necessarily always going to prioritize what they know. I mean, what is it like? People say that like when you bring in a neurosurgeon to the Sistine Chapel, they see like a brain in Michelangelo's drawing, and then if you bring in like a gynecologist, they see like a womb. They're like, oh, this is like this. So like it's like every hammer sees a nail. Basically, is sort of the issue when you have ruled by experts, when
Hmm.
that's not really a good way to do government, because like with Fauci and like the COVID state, like it becomes just very narrowly focused on the maximalist answer to a problem that has a lot of different implications. They're not considering the broader picture, and that's my take
Yeah.
on it.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. That's actually a very similar take to one that Hayek made in The Road to Serfdom, where he basically said like, um, let's see if I can remember this. Um, yeah, he basically makes the point that like if you go for a group of experts, um, what you're gonna get is like each expert is going to want to improve their own or is going to push for their own uh, um, job because or their own profession because number one their job is at stake and number two like they genuinely want they see genuine problems and they want those problems fixed which is to miss the forest for the trees um, but yeah so I don't know like if you would like Hayek in that particular take but I think it's an interesting one did you say like, would the elite replace the monarch, or would the elite vote for the monarch? In your view,
I think that they would supplement it, and I think you need a good give and
supplement. Okay.
take. I think it really depends on like the specific facts and circumstances. If you have a really strong, motivated, and energetic monarch who's a good leader and a good politician and a good man, I think you want him to take the lead. But like sometimes you're not always going to get that. You're going to get a weaker politician. You're going to get a weaker emperor, right? The center's not going to be as strong.
Yeah.
In that case, you want to rely on the elites more. In my view, I think the emperor is more important as a figurehead than as like a person, like than as like a political force. And I
Oh,
think
interesting.
insofar as he is a political force, his goal is coalition building. He takes different aspects of his society and he brings them together. Right? He's a unifying
Mm-hmm.
force. He's not a partisan pushing a specific agenda. And I think that he
Yeah.
he sort of allays conflicts in the elite. That's how I would envision the role. And again, this is not in our society now. I think that
Yeah.
for the kind of society that I'm looking for to be constructed, you do need a super hyper partisan group to push that
Mm-hmm.
through and sort of solve a lot of the cultural issues that we have right now. You can't build a coalition when half of the country thinks that murdering infants is okay. In that case,
Yeah.
you do need a hyper partisan. You do need
Yeah.
aggressive stances, and that's where we're at right now. Is like what I'm envisioning is the long term vision. What do we do once we've
Mhm.
won? Not like what are we fighting for? Not what do we need to do to get there.
Yeah.
And to bring in other people, I'm interested to hear what Equus and Robert have to say, Liz, which is how do we get to the point where we're in like a decent society?
Well, hmm,
Yeah. Sorry, I was kind of attacking John there a little bit. Man, I have so many more questions, but yeah, I want to show them to see what Robert and Equus come up with.
I mean, that's a very good question. It's a very difficult question. I mean, a lot of people have basically taken the slogan of "there is no political solution," um, and you can kind of see why people might be drawn to that opinion. Um, I do think that there's probably with the increasing gap and the sort of divide between red and blue America, you do see both sides sort of becoming more extremist and more radicalized. And you see this also in the Republican Party just as much as you do in the Democratic Party, perhaps even more so, where there is a sort of populist push within the Republican Party, especially among certain young Republicans, and that can really generate the sort of political impetus that we want to establish something like an integralist society, if the person at the helm is the right person. I mean, obviously, it could go in a very bad direction as well.
Yeah. Oh crap!
Okay, I don't know what I did incorrectly,
There's a
but
coalition war against you.
there's a coalition war against me. Yeah.
Crap. I had like 7,000 I was going to send to help with the siege, and I just got intercepted. I thought, man, I got faked out.
You must have no CB. The game thinks you know CB these guys. That's the only answer. This
That's
is
so
crazy.
weird.
All of Germany is declaring war on you.
I know.
That is weird.
It's literally
Um,
just the Bohemians and I on your time. What do you want to do here, Jacob?
I don't know, man. Like, I can't even like sue for peace with anyone. Not even the Teutonic Knights.
What do they want
Yeah,
from you?
I don't know. They just want to show superiority.
No, oh, well, I mean, like, uh, can you like right click on your? Can you basically try and make peace with? Oh, it's probably too early, but try and make peace with them, and then like suggest demands and see what they want. We might be able to force these guys to make peace with you quick. I don't think I can join your coalition war because we're not allies, unfortunately, but I can give you all my army in condottieri. I'm sieging down your enemies right now, so I'll stay in the war. But once you make peace with the Teutonic Knights, I'll give you my guys. I think we'll probably have to make peace though, because these guys look like they mean business.
They want me to give up Mazovia, um, the regions that we just annexed in the Bohemian War, pay 280 ducats, and release Galicia Volhynia.
That's
There's
a
no
ton.
way.
That's too
No.
much. Yeah, that
They
you can't
want
make
one
that deal.
they want 100% war score basically.
Yeah, there's no. We're not making peace. We'll fight them, and then we'll see if they'll give us a better deal. But they need to get serious. This is crazy. I can probably declare war on the Hungarians if you want me to like distract them, but that will be a
Um
hard battle for me.
yeah, I don't know. I'm probably going to go eat dinner soon.
Okay.
Just cuz it's a little bit late.
all right.
We've been at this for like 2.5 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, time flies when you're having fun, I guess. All right. Well, I guess this is kind of a suspenseful place to stop it. I'm in the middle of a war with Aragon. Robert is trying to conquer Brittany, and it sounds like you guys are having some interesting tactics, interesting results from declaring a no CB war. So, lot to look forward to for the next one. Um, all right, so yeah, thank you all for coming. As I said, we hopefully we'll be doing this exact game with the four of us weekly. So we'll pick up right where we left off, 21st of April, 1449, and just see how it goes. So yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, Eques, and thank you, Robert. And God bless everybody who made it this far.